The poor cowboy became my family's savior. Part 1. The stranger on the edge of town. On the far edge of a dry and forgotten valley, there stood a small ranch that time seemed to have abandoned. The land was cracked and tired, the fields once green but now covered in dust and brittle grass. A weak wind moved through the wooden fences, making them creak like they were speaking of old struggles. This was the home of a poor family who had worked the land for many years, trying again and again to survive, even when everything seemed against them. The family was small but strong in heart. The father tried his best to keep things going, fixing broken tools and checking the empty water barrels every morning. The mother took care of the home, always hoping that things would change for the better. The young son helped wherever he could, even though he was still learning what hard work truly meant. But no matter how hard they tried, the land was not giving them what they needed anymore. Rain had not fallen properly for a long time. The well was getting lower each week. The animals were weak, and the crops barely grew. On top of that, the family had debts that kept growing like a shadow they could not escape. Every night they sat quietly at the dinner table, not because they had nothing to say, but because they were too tired to speak about their worries. One evening, as the sky turned orange and the sun slowly disappeared behind the hills, something unusual happened. A lone cowboy appeared on the dusty road leading to the ranch. He was riding a tired horse that looked like it had traveled many miles without proper rest. The cowboy himself looked worn, with a simple hat, dusty boots, and clothes that had clearly seen many difficult days. He did not look dangerous or rich. He looked like someone who had survived a long and hard journey. He stopped near the fence and quietly looked at the ranch for a moment. The family noticed him from a distance and felt unsure. Strangers were rare in this area, and usually, they brought trouble or bad news. The father stepped forward carefully, keeping a calm but alert expression. The cowboy gently raised his hand in greeting and said he only needed water for his horse and a place to rest for the night. The family was not fully comfortable, but they were also not unkind people. After a short silence, they allowed him to enter. The cowboy thanked them simply and led his horse to a small, shaded area near the barn. The mother brought him water, and the son watched him closely, curious but cautious. That night, the cowboy stayed quietly outside near the barn instead of going inside. He sat on an old wooden step and looked at the land for a long time. The wind moved through the empty fields, and the sound of it felt heavy, like it was carrying stories of struggle. The cowboy's eyes followed the land carefully, noticing details most people would ignore. The dry soil, the broken fence lines, the uneven ground, everything seemed to speak to him in a silent language. Inside the house, the family spoke in low voices. They wondered who he was and why he was traveling alone. The father felt something strange about him, not fear but curiosity. There was something calm in the cowboy's presence, something that did not feel like danger, but also did not feel ordinary. Later that night, the sky became completely dark, and the stars appeared one by one. The ranch became silent except for the soft sound of the wind and the occasional movement of animals. The cowboy still did not sleep. He walked slowly around the edge of the property, studying the ground like someone searching for answers hidden beneath the surface. He paused near the fence line and bent down, touching the soil. After a long silence, he looked toward the distant hills where faint lights from town could be seen. His expression changed slightly, as if he had discovered something troubling. He whispered to himself, barely audible, "This land is not failing on its own." He stood up slowly, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon. Inside the house, everyone was asleep except the father, who noticed a faint shadow moving outside. He stepped closer to the window and saw the cowboy standing still near the fence, staring into the distance as if he was waiting for something unseen. The father felt a strange uneasiness, but could not explain why. Just before dawn, the cowboy finally spoke, his voice calm but serious. He said words that would change everything for this struggling family. "This land isn't failing, it's being taken." The father froze as he heard this. Before he could respond or ask what the cowboy meant, a distant sound broke the silence of the morning. It was the sound of hoofbeats, slow and steady, coming from the far end of the valley. And in that moment, the cowboy turned toward the sound with a focused gaze, as if he already knew what was coming next. Part 2. Secrets Beneath the Soil. The early morning sun rose slowly over the dry valley, but the peace did not return to the ranch. The words spoken by the cowboy still stayed in the air like a heavy cloud. This land isn't failing, it's being taken. The family could not understand it fully, but they felt something serious was hidden behind those words. The father stood outside near the fence, watching the cowboy carefully. The cowboy was now walking along the boundary of the land again, as if he was reading something written on the ground. He stopped at different points, looked at old wooden posts, and studied the direction of broken fences. His eyes were calm, but his mind was clearly working fast. The mother came outside with worry in her face. She asked the father if they should trust this stranger. The father did not answer quickly. He had lived on this land for many years, but now for the first time, he felt unsure about it. The cowboy did not act like someone who wanted trouble. Instead, he acted like someone who already knew a hidden truth. After some time, the cowboy returned to them and spoke again in a calm voice. He said he had worked before as a range scout, helping to map land and track boundaries in different regions. He explained that he had seen cases where poor ranchers lost their land not because of nature, but because of silent planning by powerful people. He pointed toward the far side of the property and said there were signs that something was wrong. The fence line did not match old marks. The water path looked slightly changed. Even the official land records, he believed, might not match what was on the ground anymore. The family listened in silence. The young son looked confused but curious. The mother looked worried. The father felt a mix of anger and fear. If what the cowboy said was true, then their struggle was not just against drought, but against something planned and hidden. Later that day, the cowboy began helping without asking for anything. He repaired broken fence posts using simple tools. He checked the water system and tried to guide what little flow remained into better direction. He worked quietly, without showing off, but every movement showed experience and patience. As the day passed, the ranch started to feel slightly more organized, but the feeling of danger did not go away. It only changed shape, becoming more invisible. In the afternoon, a horse rider arrived at the ranch gate. He wore clean clothes and carried papers in a leather bag. He introduced himself as a land broker from town. His voice was polite, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. He told the family that their land was becoming difficult to maintain. He spoke about debt, low production, and rising pressure. Then he suggested something simple, selling the ranch before things got worse. He said it would save them from future pain and financial loss. The father felt anger rise inside him, but he controlled it. The mother looked down, trying to hide her fear. The young son stayed close to the house, watching quietly. The cowboy stepped forward slowly and listened to everything without interruption. When the broker finished speaking, the cowboy asked a few calm questions about land records and boundary history. His voice was not loud, but it carried confidence. The broker smiled slightly and warned them again. He said outsiders often create confusion, and it is better to trust official systems instead of strangers. After saying this, he rode away, leaving behind a strange silence. That evening, the cowboy did not rest. He walked alone along the fence line again, checking every corner carefully. The family watched him from a distance. They were beginning to trust him, but still not fully understand him. Near the western edge of the property, the cowboy suddenly stopped. He knelt down and brushed away dry dirt with his hand. Beneath the soil, he found something that made his expression change. A small wooden stake was buried partially in the ground. It was not natural. It looked placed there on purpose. He pulled it out slowly and examined it. Markings were carved into it, signs used by land survey teams. This meant one thing. Someone had recently marked this land for official claim. The cowboy stood up slowly, holding the stake in his hand. His face became serious. Back at the house, the family noticed his silence and walked toward him. When they saw what he was holding, their confusion turned into worry. The cowboy looked at the horizon where the town lay far in the distance. Then he said softly, "This is no accident. Someone is preparing to take this land officially." The wind blew harder across the empty fields, and for the first time, the ranch did not feel like a home. It felt like a place standing on the edge of a decision that could change everything. And somewhere far away, unseen by them, the next move was already being prepared. Part 3. The Stand for the Ranch. The discovery of the survey stake changed everything for the family. The quiet fear that had been growing in their hearts now became clear and sharp. Someone was not only watching their land, but preparing to take it away in a legal way. The cowboy stood silently near the fence, holding the wooden stake in his hand, while the wind moved across the dry fields like a warning. The father walked closer and looked at the stake carefully. His face tightened as he understood what it meant. The mother covered her mouth, trying to control her worry. The young son stayed behind them, feeling for the first time that their home might not be safe anymore. The cowboy did not waste time. He said that if they waited too long, the land could be officially claimed without their control. He explained that in such cases, documents and records matter more than words. If they did not act quickly, they could lose everything even if they had lived there for years. That night, the family could not sleep. The house was quiet, but their thoughts were loud. The father kept thinking about the stranger from town, the land broker, and his polite but dangerous words. The mother kept checking the windows, as if expecting someone to appear outside. The young son sat near the lamp, watching the shadows move across the walls. Outside, the cowboy was still awake. He studied old maps the family had kept in a wooden box. He compared them with what he had seen on the land. Slowly, a pattern became clear. Boundaries had shifted slightly over time, not by nature, but by human hands. Small changes, done carefully, had created a big difference. The next morning, the cowboy suggested they go to town. He said the truth could only be confirmed through official records. The father was unsure at first, but he knew they had no other choice. If they stayed silent, they might lose without even understanding how. The journey to town was long and dusty. The sun was strong and the road felt endless. The cowboy led the way, calm and focused. The father followed closely, while the mother and son stayed together behind them. Every step felt heavier as they moved farther from their ranch. When they reached town, everything felt different. The streets were busy and people moved quickly. The family felt out of place, but the cowboy stayed steady. He guided them to a small record office where land documents were stored. Inside the office, old papers filled shelves and cabinets. The cowboy requested specific land records connected to their ranch. The clerk hesitated but eventually agreed. Hours passed as the cowboy carefully reviewed documents line by line. Slowly, he began to uncover something disturbing. Some records showed altered boundary lines. Some signatures looked slightly different from original ones. And some documents had been filed recently, even though they were supposed to be old. The father watched in silence as the truth slowly came together. It was not one big mistake. It was a careful process done over time. Someone had been slowly changing the identity of their land. As they prepared to leave the office, a familiar voice was heard outside. The land broker was standing near the entrance, waiting for them. His presence felt calm, but his eyes showed something sharper. He greeted them politely and said he was surprised to see them in town. Then he reminded them again about the offer to sell the ranch. His tone was softer this time, but the meaning behind his words was stronger. The cowboy stepped forward and faced him directly. For the first time, the calm silence of the cowboy turned into firm control. He asked the broker about the changed records and the survey stake. The broker smiled slightly but did not answer directly. Instead, he said that land always changes hands in difficult times, and only those who understand systems survive. The atmosphere became tense, but no loud argument happened. Everything was controlled, but full of meaning. The father felt anger rising, but he stayed quiet. The mother held her son closer. After a moment, the cowboy said something simple but powerful. He said truth does not need permission to exist. The broker did not respond. He simply stepped aside and let them pass, but his silence felt like a warning. Back at the ranch that evening, the family gathered outside. The wind was stronger than before, and dark clouds were forming in the distance. The cowboy explained that they now had proof, but proof alone might not be enough. The opposition would not stop easily. He said the next step would decide everything. Either they would defend their land properly, or they would lose it through legal pressure. The father looked at his family, and then at the land he had worked on all his life. He finally made his decision. He said they would not give up without a fight. The cowboy nodded quietly, as if he expected this answer from the beginning. He began preparing a plan, but his eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. Far away, the sound of approaching horses could be heard again, slow and steady, as if the final stage of the conflict was already beginning to arrive. Part 4. The price of a promise. The morning after the warning sound of distant horses, the ranch felt different. The air was heavy, and the wind moved slowly across the dry land. The family stood outside their house, looking toward the road that led to town. No one spoke much. Everyone knew something important was about to happen. The cowboy was already awake. He stood near the fence line, watching the horizon with calm eyes. He did not look nervous, but focused, like someone who had already prepared for this moment in his mind many times before. The father walked up to him and asked quietly what would happen if things did not go their way. The cowboy did not answer immediately. He only looked at the land for a moment and said that truth always has its own time. It may be slow, but it does not disappear. By late morning, the sound of horses finally arrived, but it was not what the family expected. Instead of armed pressure or force, it was a group of officials from town. They wore formal clothing and carried documents. Behind them were also a few local witnesses, people from nearby areas who had seen changes in land activity over time. The land broker was also there, standing slightly behind the officials. His face looked calm, but his eyes were less confident than before. The officials stepped forward and announced that they had come to review a land dispute. The cowboy calmly walked forward and presented the evidence they had collected. He placed old maps, corrected boundary notes, survey records, and the recently found stake on a wooden table outside the house. The father and mother watched closely, their hearts beating fast. The young son stood beside them, holding his mother's hand tightly. One of the officials carefully examined the documents. As he read, his expression slowly changed. He compared old records with new ones. He checked signatures, stamps, and boundary changes. The more he studied, the clearer it became that something had been altered over time. The cowboy did not speak much during this process. He only answered questions when asked. His calm behavior made the truth feel stronger, not weaker. Then the witnesses stepped forward. One by one, they explained what they had seen in town over the past months. They spoke about changes in paperwork, unusual land discussions, and pressure on struggling landowners. Their voices were simple, but honest. The land broker tried to explain himself. He said everything was done legally and within system rules, but now his words sounded less convincing. The officials continued reviewing everything carefully, ignoring interruptions. After a long silence, the lead official finally spoke. He said that the evidence showed clear manipulation of land boundaries and improper filing of records. The changes did not match natural or legal processes. A quiet wave of relief moved through the family, but they did not celebrate yet. They waited, because the final decision had not been fully announced. The official then turned toward the family and said that the land claim against them was invalid. The property belonged to them, and no forced sale or transfer could take place. For a moment, everything became silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. The mother covered her face, overwhelmed with relief. The father lowered his head, feeling years of pressure finally lift from his shoulders. The young son smiled for the first time in many days. The cowboy stepped back quietly. He did not show excitement or pride. He simply watched the land, as if confirming that balance had been restored. The land broker said nothing more. He slowly stepped away and left with the officials, his plan completely exposed and stopped. After they all left, the ranch became quiet again. But this silence was different. It was peaceful, not heavy. The sky looked brighter, and the wind felt softer. The family turned toward the cowboy. The father walked up to him and thanked him deeply. He said that without him, they would have lost everything they worked for. The mother also thanked him, her voice full of emotion. The young son looked at him with respect and admiration. But the cowboy did not stay long in the moment. He looked at the house, then the fields, and then the distant road. He said softly that he was glad they would remain safe, but his journey was not finished. The family was surprised. They had started to think of him as part of their life now. The father asked if he would stay, even for a little longer. The cowboy smiled slightly but shook his head. He said that some people are meant to protect places for a while, but not belong to them forever. His role was to help when needed, then move on when the work was done. That evening, as the sun began to set, the cowboy prepared to leave. The family stood near the fence, watching him mount his horse. Before riding away, he paused one last time. He looked at the ranch and said, "A home is not just land. It is the people who refuse to lose it." Then he turned and slowly rode down the dusty road, disappearing into the warm colors of the sunset. The family stayed outside for a long time after he left. The ranch felt alive again. Not because it was perfect, but because it was finally theirs to protect. And somewhere in the distance, the cowboy continued his journey, carrying the quiet story of the family he had saved, not as a hero who stayed, but as one who came when he was needed most and left when peace finally returned.